the Convention of States project appears. So welcome, thanks for coming out tonight. We have, first of all, I want to say we have a national, not local, a national celebrity here tonight, Scott Wagner. And our congratulations to you, Scott. I thought we had a couple grassroots candidates here. I saw Ernie lingering around. Ernie Marasotis, he's out? Okay, and is Kelly Henshaw here, or just his people? Just, okay, all right. All right, Jim High is going to begin our meeting with a prayer.
For those who are able, would you all please stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? Let us pray. Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have allowed us to gather here this evening for the purposes of becoming better educated in the ways and means of political activity in all the ways that the York 912 has advocated for now going on 5 years. Dear Heavenly Father, we have a number of candidates who have come forward, and we ask thy blessing upon these candidates who are taking the time and providing the motivation and interest to give the voting public what they need and the reason they have stayed away from polls. This year they will have many choices, good candidates, but talking about issues that we hope you will find favorable and bless them for all their particular efforts. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this victory and all the attendant publicity that has come with it for all the right reasons, dear Lord. We thank you for watching over those who worked the polls that day and did all the various tasks that need to be done in an election. These are all volunteers. No one is being paid. No one asks to be paid. We ask thy providential watching over them to see that they complete their day in safety. And now if you would grant us traveling mercies as we journey home, help us to stay motivated in this activity, enhancing your kingdom here on earth. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
How you doing? How you doing?
All right, well, while Jim was praying, I was praying Simon Campbell would show up, and he did. Simon, do you need a minute? Do you want Chuck to go first? I'm good. You're good? You're ready? Okay, so Simon Campbell, Chuck, where are you at? Are you good with going back in the order? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, all yours. Simon Campbell from Pennsylvanians for Union.
Wander around. Well, thank you very much. I literally got here 10 seconds ago, so that was good timing, I guess. Thank you, Beth, and thank you all for coming out. It's nice to be here. I forgot to ask you how long you want me to talk for, because I will go like 4 hours if you want to put time on it. Yes. Okay, well, I'll just kind of keep going until you do that. It's nice to be here. My name is, Beth said, I'm Simon Campbell. I run a grassroots advocacy organization called Pennsylvanians for Union Reform. And by way of a plug, I have my lovely assistant Paula at the back. She has business cards. We hope that you take one. We have a Facebook page we hope you go onto. We have a website. You can sign up on email. And we do lots of fun stuff. Okay? So you really want to get onto our email list. We do all kinds of fun videos. We do updates on all things union related. That's why we're called Pennsylvanians Union Reform. Actually, I wanted to call the company Let's Just Smack Public Sector Unions All Over Town, but I was told that's a bit politically incorrect, so we've got the nice thing. Too loud? Is that better? Can't hear?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You want me to bring it closer? Is that better? Do I have to adjust something? I'm not very technical. How's that? Is that better? Are you sure? I hear an echo, but alright. If you guys, you good. So, our organisation, what do we get involved with? Well, like I said, all things public sector union related. It's really hard in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to think about any kind of reform initiative, no matter what your area of interest might be, without understanding that the government unions are probably going to be opposed to it. And the reason is they love the status quo. They exist for one purpose only, to have higher government spending, such that government union officials can make more money. And of course, the biggest and baddest of all of the government unions is, does anyone know? PSCA, the Pennsylvania State Extortion, Education Association. I love how the teachers union here are called an education association, right? You can tell that originally I was born and raised in Louisiana. You can tell that. It's good, like at least in England where I grew up, we call them, the union's called the NUT, National Union of Teachers, or we call them NUT, that's what they are. But so you come out and I'm like, what do you mean you're an education association? You're a union, for heaven's sake. You have the same federal filing requirements as the Teamsters, the AFL-CIO. Stop calling yourself an education association. Anyway, the teachers union. I kind of got started as an activist, if you will, many years ago. There was a teacher strike in my local school district. I live in Bucks County. And they threw all my 3 kids out of school for a month. And I'm like, that's not very cool. Like, I really have a bad attitude of you people for doing that. You know, 37 other states don't allow school teachers to go on strike. Think about that. I mean, we are in the minority. We have more teacher strikes in Pennsylvania than any other state in the nation. There's not many things we're #1 for in Pennsylvania, but throwing children out of school, we rank #1 in the nation. It's not a particularly good thing to be proud of. However, that's Pennsylvania. So when I kind of got going on the teacher strike issue, and there's a bill pending, we encourage you to contact the state reps, your senators, that would make teacher strikes illegal. And the issue is real simple. I mean, I don't care whether you're conservative or liberal. When you ask the general public, should a child in Pennsylvania have a legal right to a strike-free education, yes or no? What's the answer? Yes. You know, because if you take the opposite side of the view, and I've testified at hearings on this in Harrisburg, where like the union people show up and they go, it's a working right to strike. And I'm like, really? One hearing I was at, I took my, she was 9 years old at the time, my daughter. And when it was my turn to testify, I was so fed up. I had my daughter sit next to me at the testimony table in front of the House committee. And there's a section of the Pennsylvania Constitution that says, the General Assembly is required to maintain a thorough and efficient system of public education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth. So I read the Constitution and I'm like, well, how can we have a law that allows the schools to be shut? How thorough and efficient is it when the kids are at home sitting on the couch watching TV? That's not a thorough and efficient system. How can this law be allowed under the Constitution, right? This is how my brain works. And so it was my turn to testify after the union were like, well, workers' right to strike. And one of the state reps, I've since learned the word rhino. You heard that word? Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I believe in rounding them up every second May and dropping them off at the zoo where they belong. one of these state reps, I believe in a teacher's right to strike. So I said, and the union, when they testified, had their lawyer, PSA, had their corporate attorney sitting there testifying to their nonsense. And so when I sat down, I said, Mr. Chairman, thanks for inviting me. Since the teachers union brought their lawyer, Stop Teacher Strikes, we brought our lawyer. Here she is, Stephanie. She's 9 years old. So she's going to read a passage today from a document with which you're obviously all unfamiliar. It's called the Constitution. And because the passage we wish to read to you is incredibly technical legally, it's got a lot of jargon in it, that's why we wanted to have a 9-year-old come and explain it. So I said, our lawyer will now read Article 3, Section 14 of the Constitution. So Stephanie sits there, she goes, the General Assembly shall be required to maintain a thorough and efficient system to serve the needs of the Commonwealth. And I said, right, Mr. State Rep, I have a question. What part of thorough and efficient system do you consider strikes? What part of thorough and efficient do you consider throwing the children out of school? You're solemnly sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution. Would you like me to bring a 6-year-old to read it to you next time? So I'm going like this in the testimony. And I testified for like 10 minutes like this, and then there's like a Q&A at the end of it, and I said, does any member of the committee have any questions for me or our attorney? And they all start going like, no, we just leave the building, thank you. I'm like, come on attorney, I'll buy you an ice cream. You just blew the PSCA's attorney away. So that's kind of like how I got started on this, but on the teacher strike issue. But you fast forward to today, and you think about, I know the property tax is a big issue, but guess who opposes that? The teachers union. Why? Because they like to elect their own friends onto school boards to keep raising your taxes forever. So they're opposed to that, they're opposed to school choice, they're opposed to prevailing wage reform. I mean, why are we spending 20% more on public construction projects because of prevailing wage? Because we have politicians in Harrisburg that are bought and paid for by the unions. And I'm not necessarily, I get labeled, anti-union, and I'm like, you know what? I don't really mind. I mean, the private sector unions, I'm like, do what you want, just, my tax dollars aren't involved. If you want to just kill your own jobs, do whatever you want. But in the government, in the public sector, I don't believe we should allow any public employee to go on strike, because a strike in the public sector is a strike against the public interest. And in schools, it's a strike against children's interest. I mean, we have politicians that are terrified to say words like, it's a strike against the public interest. But when you think back, I grew up in the 1970s in the UK. And at the time, we had public sector unions were going wild in the 1970s in England. I mean, just about every industry was nationalised and owned by the government. We had the auto workers on strike. We had funeral home directors on strike. We had garbage collector strikes. We had images of London, the streets piled high with 10 feet rotting garbage. Everyone was on strike. We had images of literally thugs pulling people out of lorries for crossing a picket line. And in 1979, against that backdrop, the first female prime minister got elected, Lady Thatcher. And I wish every time I say her name, I'm like, someone give me a glass of wine. This to me was my heroine, Margaret Thatcher. When she got elected in 1979, I mean, man, she just took out her handbag to some of these union leaders. It's like, man. And I think to myself, watching what's happening in my new country, I became a citizen in 2009, United States citizen, thank you. And I just say, why would this country, my new home, want to go back to what I saw growing up with public sector unions? I don't get it. We're not, you think about unions, and I'm a big right-to-work supporter. Are you all familiar with the right-to-work? I don't get how in the birthplace of freedom, Pennsylvania, we can have a law that allows someone to be forced into a union or forced to pay union dues if they choose not to be a union member. How can you have a law that says if you want to get a job working in this school district or working for the county or even in the private sector, if you choose not to belong to a union, we're going to force you to pay union dues if you want to earn a living and provide food for your family and put it on the table. How is that allowed? If you're not a union member, why are you forced to pay union dues? I don't get it. I mean, I tell this to some of my more liberal friends, and they're like, no, that's wrong. I mean, I'm like, yeah. And the left, I've learned that the language that the left uses, it blows me away. They use expressions like fair share fees. Have you heard this? So if you're not a union member, in their world, you benefit from what the union does in collective bargaining. You benefit. So says the union. So I spent I do a reality check every time I speak. In a free society, who should decide whether a union benefits an individual? The union or the individual? The individual. So if the individual thinks the union benefits them, then fine, they'll join and pay the dues, right? And if they don't think the union benefits them, then they shouldn't be forced to join and shouldn't be forced to pay any dues. And the union says, well, they're free riders. No, they're captive passengers. Because they can't choose their own representation. It's not fair share fees, it's called compulsory union dues. Stolen money. That's what it is. They use words like collective bargaining. That's not what it is. It's called monopoly bargaining. There's one union in every school district for the teachers. There's one union that monopolizes workers across all aspects of government. One. They call it exclusive representation unions. It sounds like a country club, doesn't it? It's called compulsory representation. If you want to get a job in your local school district as a teacher, you are told up front, you're not allowed to negotiate for yourself by law. You're not allowed. You might be the best, most talented teacher in the world. You will get paid according to what this entity, this private organization, has negotiated on your behalf. It's just ridiculous. I look at all these issues and I'm like, merit-based pay for teachers. I'm a big believer in merit-based pay. The fact of the matter is, every parent is like, you should, right? Why should a talented, fantastic teacher be stuck getting paid next to someone that's coasting along as a horrible teacher? I don't get that. What about the forces of supply and demand? The reality of life inside our schools is that different positions have different forces of supply and demand. If you want to fill a kindergarten teacher, in my school district at least, and probably in many districts around Pennsylvania, you might get 400 applicants within a week. You try filling a position for a high school math or physics teacher, you might get 3. Those forces of supply and demand are different, so why is it as an employer we can't offer more money for positions that are in short supply of talent and less money for positions where we have a glut of supply of labor? The children, the students would benefit from attracting talent to positions in short supply, and the taxpayers would benefit too. Why can't we do it? Because the unions are there, right? So when you talk about merit-based pay, I don't understand how people like Barack Obama or even people in Harrisburg can even talk about it. Because the solution to merit-based pay is very simple. You just eliminate the unions. Because then every individual teacher can contract their skills and their services directly with their employer. Right? You don't need a federal or a state solution to a discussion between Mrs. Smith and her principal. You don't need it. Mrs. Smith will just say, look, here's my resume. I know that you're in short supply for my position. Here's what I'm going to bring to the table, and this is what I'd like to negotiate with you. And guess what? I'm a better teacher than that person, and I'm asking for this much money. The employer can, and this is what happens in the private sector every day. Yet for some reason we bought into this theory of a factory line model of education. It doesn't serve students and it doesn't serve taxpayers. It just doesn't. So my attitude on public sector unions is, when you talk about right to work to me is just nothing more than a starting point. Right to work says, you don't have to pay any compulsory dues. However, even in right to work states, you're still forced under monopoly representation. Let's get rid of monopoly bargaining. Get rid of it. No union should have a right to represent someone who doesn't want to be represented by them. This is the United States of America. So to me, right to work is a good starting point if you want to be moderate. I love how the liberals go, well, that's a really right-wing thing. I'm like, really? Really? Not being forced to pay union dues? No, that's like the baby step. So the government unions, they have to be tackled. Their political power has to be tackled with. I don't care what your issue is. If you're not willing to talk about the fact that we have state reps and senators that are owned and operated by these unions, nothing's going to move. So you look at the issues today that are burning, in the news. Everyone heard of paycheck protection? You heard of that? You've seen the mailings? I don't like that expression. I've got friends on the Commonwealth Foundation, and I'll tell you why. Paycheck protection, I don't know who comes up with these marketing slogans. I would rather call that initiative the let's throw them in jail bill. And I'll tell you why, okay? I'm nothing against against public employers. I'm not interested in protecting their paychecks. I'd rather protect the paychecks of the taxpayers in a recession. That's point number one. The marketing on this paycheck, oh, forget it. This is about you, whether or not it is corrupt to use government resources to assist any private organization's political operations. That's what this is. I mean, you remember Tom Corbett, Attorney General, before he was governor, right? You know, we have elected officials sitting in jail today that Tom Corbett put in jail when he was Attorney General. For what reason? They were using government public resources for campaign purposes, right? Yeah. It's a criminal offense. They're sitting in jail. So how is it? And I'm just going to talk about the PAC money for a minute, because the deductions that are occurring from public employee paychecks, one is union dues, and the other is political campaign contributions. Now, legally speaking, the two are different. However, they're both political money, right? One is soft political money, the dues. The unions use dues for all kinds of lobbying, get out the vote drives, and they can use it for independent campaign expenditures. So it can be used, union dues, for direct election influencing activity. But the other deductions that go on are PAC money. Now, PAC money is campaign contributions. They're required to be disclosed under campaign finance law, right? That is money directly influencing elections. So when the government is in the business of collecting and remitting money, campaign contributions that influence elections, that is using governmental resources for activity that, in my mind, we have people sitting in jail for. So when we talk about eliminating payroll deduction of political money, and I say, call it throw them in jail bill, well, it should be. It should be criminal under current law for this activity to happen. And the reality of it is, under current law, those deductions are negotiable. Union dues deductions and PAC contributions. So when school boards are negotiating with the teachers' union for compulsory representation purposes, I won't say collective bargaining, or when county commissioners are negotiating contracts with their unions, or at the state level, we have state unions that the executive branch negotiates with. The state workers' union like AFSCME, UFCW, the liquor store union, SEIU. Guess who negotiates state union contracts? Anyone know?
Governor.
Who heads the executive branch?
The governor.
The governor. Good. I hope you're watching, Governor, because you know how I feel about this. He gets elected in 2011, right? Our Attorney General. I'm throwing these people in jail for using public resources for political purposes. 6 months after becoming governor, Tom Corbett's in contract negotiations with the state union, with the state unions, AFSCME, SEIU, the others I just mentioned. It's negotiable. Guess what Governor Corbett agreed to? To collect and remit not only the union dues, but the political campaign contributions. Why? Well, it was already in the contracts, and Ed Rendell did it before me, and I'll just do it again. Really? How about Tom Corbett and the union officials who agreed to do that? How about they both sit in jail today? Yeah. That's my attitude on it. And then today he says, well, the paycheck protection bill, I would sign it if it gets to my desk. Really? You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like him saying, well, I think I will agree that if someone else shows leadership on this legislation, I'll agree to make my own voluntary decisions illegal. Really, Tom? Really? Well, if you think that what you did should be illegal, maybe you shouldn't have done it in the first place. I mean, that's the issue. We can't allow any politician, but by way of disclosure, I happen to be a Republican, not that it's necessarily relevant. The issue is, I don't care who you are as an elected official. If you sit down behind closed doors with union officials and you agree to collect campaign contributions and political union dues, you should be sitting in jail. It's that simple. Because it's utterly corrupt. We have school districts for educating children, not for collecting campaign contributions to buy politicians. We don't have state workers so that they can, elect Democrats. That's the other thing. I'm like, Tom, you do know where that money's going, right? Really? Why don't you just collect the money for Alison Schwartz directly? Anyway, just on that issue alone, I'm like, Governor, really? But that issue is huge because what happened in Wisconsin when they passed that law to say, and I call it the collect your own flaming money. attitude, you know, like, why are we the taxpayers involved in collecting your money? If you want to join, let's say, Bally's Health Club, if you're in the private sector, do you have a right to go to your employer and say, boss, you know, I'm a member of Bally's and I can't be bothered sending Bally's my membership dues directly. Would you just collect it for me and send it to them because I can't be bothered? In the private sector, your boss would go, you know, Mr. Campbell, really, you can join Bally's, you really can, but we're really not in the business of collecting money for your private organizations. Send it directly. Yeah, so why is it that we can't do that in the public sector? You know, I'm not a union bagman. As a taxpayer, collect your own flaming money, it's that simple. That issue is pressing right now, but in Wisconsin, when they told the unions, and they passed a law, you've got to collect your own money, AFSCME lost something like 50% of their members. Because the reality of this bill, and this is why the government unions are so terrified of it, if they have to go to their own members and say, send us the money directly, they're terrified that their own members won't pay them. You know, I did a TV debate with Wendell Young, who's the head of the liquor store union. He's called Wendell Young IV. I'm from England. In England we have Queen Elizabeth II, King Henry V. I come to Pennsylvania and I'm like, really? Your union boss is a royalty? Really? Okay. I call him King Young IV. He shows up on TV with his, you know, super tuxedo. He makes his 270 grand a year, you know, 1% union boss Young. I'm for the workers. Yeah, sure you are, Wendell. How's your 270 grand a year doing? So he shows up and he's like, you know, what does he say? This is just an effort to defund us. I said, Wendell, that's on TV. I'm like, Wendell, so what you're actually saying is you would be unable to get your own members' dues. They really don't like you that much that you need the government to get your money, right? So I just used an argument against them. Oh, well, we're not saying that they wouldn't pay us. No, actually, Wendell, that's exactly what you're saying. That's exactly why you're scared, isn't it? Your own members won't pay you, and then who paid you the 270 grand a year? You might have to take a 15% pay cut, Wendell. But they're making like serious money, some of these union leaders. The head of the teachers union, he pulls down like 250 grand a year. But guess what? He's also, any of you heard of the pension crisis, by the way? Jesus. Oh, you're going to love this story. Oh, two things. How many of you are familiar with the PSBA? You know who they are? Pennsylvania, what are they called? No, that's not what they're called. They're called Pretty Silly, Blindingly Awful. And I was a school board director for 4 years, trust me, I know. They're just the other side of the union. They're another monopoly, by the way. There's one school boards association, so they invoice all 500 school districts so they can sit in nice, shiny headquarters outside of Harrisburg. But their employees, PSBA, now you'd think, right, PSBA would definitely be for pension reform, right? They're there to represent school board directors who are dealing with this pension crisis and all of the budgetary concerns. You'd think that PSBA would be right there, right? Guess whose employees are in PSAs? PSBAs. The School Boards Association, which is a private entity that invoices school districts, their own employees are in the public employee pension plan. What a racket that is. What a total... How can they be in PSAs when they're private sector employees? And I won't go into the legals on it, but this is the kind of stuff that goes on. The heads of these unions, the teachers union, Mike Crossy, his name is, he's been considered... He went on... The way that they do this, by the way, they are considered teachers on leave from their home school districts. So they go on annual leave, and they get their leave renewed by the school board, like, year after year after year, like 10 years, sometimes 15 years. So they remain on the public payroll of the local school district. And what happens is the union reimburses, and they get paid a salary and benefits, like they're a teacher. The union reimburses the district the salaries and benefits each year, so they're not out the cash. Yet, legally speaking, the president of PSCA has remained on the books of the Keystone Oaks School District outside of Pittsburgh for the last 10 years plus, when he's actually been working for the union. And he will accrue years of service through a public employee pension plan, PSAs, for all the time he spent working for the teachers union. What a scam that is. And the union reimburses his salary and benefits, not him. So the $250,000 that he gets paid by the union to be the union boss, that's not including the 100 grand that he was getting from the Keystone Oaks that the union are reimbursing, and he's going to get a pension plan on the 100 grand for all the years of dedicated service to a private entity. Oh, racket, that is. Okay, I'm being told to be quiet. So just to wrap up, I'm encouraging all of you. Oh, look, 10 minutes? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have time for Q&A, by the way? Do we have any?
We have 10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes. So, actually, if it's all right, I would, because I have a lot of stuff in my head. If any of you have any questions, if you want to just shout them out or ask me anything union related, because a lot of stuff comes to me. Do you want to?
Warn about the button. If you touch the button, you'll be subjected to this screeching noise that we contain.
First, thank you very much for, at least making me aware of a lot of these things. But let me just ask you a question. Why won't, by the fact that the Pennsylvania state government collects the dues and these PCA or political contributions, it's mandatory?
No.
So why would the employees pay them if they don't have to? In other words, you're saying they're afraid that they wouldn't pay if they were collecting their own dues.
Yes.
So why don't they not pay if it's not mandatory the way it is?
Well, on the two types of money, there's union dues and then there's voluntary PAC contributions. So the union dues, if you sign up to be a union member, by definition, the dues will get deducted from your paycheck because that's part of the collective bargaining agreement, which is negotiated by Corbett and the unions. On the PAC money, what happens is they fill in a signature authorization form, they give it to the union, and then the union turns around and gives it to the human resources people, the payroll people in government, and says, John Smith wants $20 a month or whatever, PAC money coming out of his paycheck. So the unions collect signature authorization forms that they then give to the government to say, deduct this money for John Smith. Now, I wonder how some of this works because, these signature forms that are being used, the pledge, the PAC money pledge, is on the form. It states good forever. So you do wonder whether how many state employees even realize that some form that they signed 10 years ago, and some union guy said, just sign up here. I wonder how many of them actually realize that they signed up for a good forever PAC pledge, and it's coming out of their paychecks. You do wonder about things like that. So it's done theoretically by approval of each employee. And the union's argument is, they give the signature authorization forms to government, who does the deductions. And I said to them, well, you can set up auto-direct payment through a person's personal bank account. I mean, all of us today pay all kinds of bills through our bank accounts. The banks will just do it automatically. So I say to people like Wendell, why can't you give your members the form to say, set up direct deposit between their bank account and you? Why is it that only that form to the government would work and not that one? You see, it's all done, you wonder whether the employees are really submitting these forms or whether the union officials are. That's the issue. That's why they're so scared. There's no logical reason why they'd be scared by this bill. No logical reason. If their members love them, they'll fill in a form from their bank account, right?
Do the school boards have the power to change this?
These deductions are negotiated into the contracts. There's no requirement for them to be in there. So every time your local school board is in negotiations with the union, call them up and say, guys, get rid of dues collection. Stop it.
Okay, well then what does the school board receive from the unions to motivate them to do this?
Election help. How many school board directors are teachers, former teachers,
Non-paid
retired?
position in the process.
We have laws that allow a teacher's spouse to serve on a school board and vote on the spouse's contract. It's ridiculous. There's all kinds of conflicts of interest. So certainly I would encourage you.
Everybody run for a school board seat.
Yeah, right, there you go. Run for a school board. I mean, I served for 4 years. It's a honor. Yes.
Simon, could you explain to everybody how much the PSE spends on elections and how they go to both Democrats and Republicans so to ensure that these laws that they want passed are passed?
The question was, in case you didn't hear it at the back, can I explain about how the teachers union spends money on elections and how they influence both Republicans and Democrats alike? I don't have figures at my hand right now in terms of how much, but it's millions and millions of dollars. something like that, whether it's 6 million. But the dues are a huge portion of the political activity, PAC money. The teachers' union runs the single biggest PAC outside of the political parties. And they do absolutely spread it around. I mean, in the Southeast, you know, I live in Bucks. We've got Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware. These are places that are packed with Republicans who are literally purchased by the teachers' union and other public sector unions. And it's a huge problem. They will spread the money around the Republican Party, not just the Democrats. It's not so much Democrats and Republicans as it is, you know, taxpayers versus union-backed legislators. So be alert. And we're going to post this on our website. Every single person who takes campaign contributions from public sector unions, we're going to put them all on our website. I don't care as a Republican how many Republican lawmakers get offended. They need to be outed if they're doing it. Okay, last question.
Yes, I was wondering if you have a fact sheet other than what you might have on your website that we could use for writing letters to the editor and so forth?
Not a particular fact sheet, but if you have, you know, a list of bullet points that you think, you know, would be useful for that sort of thing, we'd certainly, you know, just send me an email, and we'd certainly consider putting something like that up. Whatever people want to be able to use to put out there, we're happy to do that.
Because this is a grassroots effort.
Yes, absolutely. This is a grassroots effort.
We're getting information that we may not all have remembered or known about right now.
Yeah, so, well, certainly, if you sign up onto our email list, you get our updates, and then anyone can just contact me directly and say, you know, I'm thinking of doing this, Simon, could you put that together? We are grassroots, it's very dynamic, so whatever ideas you have, just send me a message. And
what is your web address?
It's, where's Paula? She's got all the business cards.
I have the business cards here.
Before you leave tonight, make sure you get a business card. It's got the web address, it's got the email address, the phone number, and you can sign up and get in touch with me through the website.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
My first teaching experience was with Department of Defense, and I was hired to be the substitute teacher for the union representative because she was gone so often they wanted a regular substitute in that class. I was there more than she was. This was my first taste of being in education. So I was essentially teaching her class and being paid as a substitute. She was being paid as a teacher. She wasn't there. And this was my first taste of the union business, where I became 1 in a million anti-union public school teachers. So it is a real problem. Public sector unions do a lot of damage in education. And I always thought one of the ways you could to fix education, you really have to put the kibosh on public sector unions because they really control it. So anyway, without further ado, we have Chuck Liedike here to talk about eliminating your property taxes and Senate Bill 76.
That wasn't me. That wasn't me. Good evening. Good evening. All right, we can do a little bit better than that. Good evening. Good evening. Fantastic. My name is Chuck Wagner. I am the campaign manager for Real Reform 76. I have my iPad in front of me because I've done so many different town halls across the state talking about Senate Bill 76 and House Bill 76 that more or less at this point I just kind of go off everything that's in my head, but I always, at each individual town hall meeting, I always end up forgetting at least one thing. So I wanted to make sure that I brought my iPad with me so I can share everything with you. Can everybody hear me? I see a little bit of sign language in the back, some people saying that they cannot hear. Can everybody hear me right now? There we go. So let me talk a little bit first about what Real Reform 76 is all about. Obviously, we are advocating for the passage of Senate Bill 76, which is real property tax reform here in Pennsylvania. But a lot of people don't really understand the background behind Real Reform 76. So first and foremost, I do work with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. And about 5-6 years ago, our association started surveying and polling our own membership. Now, first and foremost, there are about 33,000 members with the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors here in Pennsylvania. And overwhelmingly, they all indicated that property tax reform here in Pennsylvania is the biggest issue that they are hearing from the clients, regardless of whether it's residential property, commercial property, mixed use, industrial, second home, what have you. This is the biggest issue that they're hearing about. So we looked at a number of different proposals, and really what it came down to was about 2 years ago, we sat down with a number of different legislators. You'll hear across the state, no matter where you go, every legislator likes to put in their 2 cents. They'll say, I have a way to fix the property tax situation here in Pennsylvania, and they'll tout it, particularly during election time. So right now, if you go across the state, you're going to get a lot of people talking about how their proposal is the right proposal. So we sat down with a series of different legislators and asked them specifically, why is your proposal the best proposal for Pennsylvanians? And really what it came down to was, we really liked what we heard with the former bill, the Senate Bill 76, and that was 1776. What we did was we did an economic study, because we wanted to make sure that the numbers worked out. We wanted to make sure that the schools were well funded. We wanted to make sure that it would indeed eliminate the school portion of the property tax. And when we learned via the economic study that it did not live up to those obligations, via 1776, remember, we testified to the Senate and to the House, and we let them know, listen, if you change your numbers to a little bit more accurately fix the system, you would have a very solid program right now. So what in turn ended up happening was the creation of Senate Bill 76. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go into some details about the bill shortly, but as I mentioned, it's real property tax reform. There are several different proposals out there that single out different classes of citizens. There might be a property tax reform proposal out there that specifically indicates a cap on seniors or what have you. And the seniors in the room might say, you know, that's a very attractive thing for us. But then what ends up happening is younger individuals like myself are then left to carry the overall burden. What many people in this room might not know is Pennsylvania is the second oldest state in the entire country. However, we are one of the biggest states in the entire country for college retention. So a lot of people are coming to Pennsylvania because they like our colleges, but immediately after graduation, they leave. And there's going to be even more incentive for them to leave if we specifically put a cap only on seniors. Senate Bill 76 would eliminate the school portion of the property tax for all Pennsylvanians, all properties here in Pennsylvania. It's something that needs to happen. The funny thing is, my pen for me, I haven't even started on the first slide yet. What Simon said, actually, it's going to come full circle. When we're talking about the PSEA and the School Board Association and what have you, after you hear everything that I start to say to you, it really is going to come full circle in the sense that property taxes right now, you're going to see these big groups out there that do not want to see any type of property tax reform. They'll say that property tax reform isn't a stable thing to take a look at. They feel that property taxes are the best way to fund our schools and what have you. But the problem with that is that's always going to be their argument. When I first came on with this initiative, Real Reform 76, back in November of 2013, I did a Google search. Because I wanted to see what people in Pennsylvania were saying. What were the letters to the editor and the newspapers across Pennsylvania saying about property tax reform? Not even just Senate Bill 76, but just property tax reform in general. And when I took a look, actually the very first article that I found, I was reading it, and I didn't recognize any of the legislators' names in this one particular proposal that I saw in this letter. This is a Pennsylvania newspaper that I was reading. I did not recognize a single legislator's name. I found that to be pretty odd, to be honest with you. So I decided, you know what? How old is this article? So scroll back to the top. May 1981. So property tax reform here in Pennsylvania has been meriting letters to the editor and editorials in Pennsylvania newspapers since actually before May of 1981. But if it was that big of an issue then, it was that big of an issue even before then. You take a look at the history of property tax reform, and it goes back into the 70s. I was not born in the 70s, I was born in the 80s, and frankly what's going to end up happening is my grandkids aren't even going to see property tax reform if we don't do something about it now. So let me talk a little bit about Senate Bill 76 and why we feel that Senate Bill 76 is the appropriate solution. First and foremost, as I mentioned, there's a number of other pieces of property tax reform proposals out there. 76, although the bill, like any bill, is a big bill, is one of the most simplistic pieces of property tax reform proposals out there. What it comes down to, it's just as simple as that. As I mentioned, property tax reform here in Pennsylvania, what would happen under 76 is the bill would eliminate the school portion of the property taxes, less the existing debt. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. And what would end up happening is, to replace the funding, you would see an increase in the PIT and in the sales tax. And I'll give you some numbers in case you're jotting them down. If you're not, I'm going to give you the website later on. You can check it out for yourself later on. The PIT would go from 3.07 to 4.34%. And the sales tax would go from 6 to 7%, and you would see a slight expansion on the sales tax. A lot of people ask me, well, let's talk about the sales tax then for a second. Now, foods of necessity will not be taxed. So right now, you do not get taxed on your egg, your eggs, milk, bread, water, that kind of stuff. That's going to remain not taxed. Let's say Johnny, for his campaign party, decides he wants to order 15 pizzas. Well, Johnny's going to end up having to pay tax on those 15 pizzas. But again, remember, foods of necessity will not be taxed. Under this plan, clothing over $50 will get taxed. Now, clothing under $50 remains not taxed. Now, one of the questions I usually receive regarding that is, so I'm going to get taxed on a $51 pair of jeans. Actually, you're only going to get taxed $1, so it's above that $50 threshold. So you would be taxed on that $1 and so on and so forth. So I mentioned the existing debt. Pennsylvania has 500 school districts. When you take a look at the average school districts here in Pennsylvania, the average operating debt is about 10%. So most school districts here in Pennsylvania, and obviously it does vary, but for the most part, the average here in Pennsylvania, school boards are operating about 10% of their operating budgets towards existing debt. So what does that mean? I'm going to throw some numbers out at you. So $1,000, let's just pretend for a second, you have a $1,000 school property tax bill year after year. $900 would be eliminated. The $100, which again is that 10% that goes towards the existing debt, the $100 would stay in place until the existing debt is paid off. If your school district has no existing debt, you won't even be paying that extra $100 either. That would be completely eliminated. Now keep in mind, existing debt. Now school districts can carry debt anytime they want, but they cannot add any more debt to this. So let's say they wanted to add debt for something else, they could do that, but they would have to find another way to fund it. They would not be able to attach it to the school property tax. So 50 years from now, you're not going to still be paying that $100. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Thank you, I appreciate that. What I like to say about this bill is one of the biggest things that is exciting for us is we live in a world that's full of partisanship, and it really doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on because this bill has true bipartisan support. In the state Senate right now, first off, there's 50 state senators in the state Senate. 25 of them are co-sponsors. 13 of them are Republicans, and 12 of them are Democrats. This is a truly bipartisan bill. This is a bill that was born from 2 Republican prime sponsors and 2 Democratic prime sponsors, hearing the concerns of their constituents across Pennsylvania. If you take a look at a Pennsylvania map, you would see a lot of color in terms of those that do support this bill as a co-sponsor. Now, just because somebody is not a co-sponsor does not mean that they do not support this bill. We've been told from a few different state senators that they are also in support of this bill. They just simply have not put their name as a co-sponsor to it. So we're very excited about seeing what's going to happen in the state Senate. A lot of times people will ask me, so when can we potentially see a vote on this? Well, like I said, I came on board with this initiative in November of 2013. I was told in November of 2013, it should come up for a vote in December. So I was telling people December. Then in December, I was told January. So I was telling people, it's going to be January, guys. Well, so on and so forth. There was a meeting of the prime sponsors of this legislation with Senate leadership saying this needs to come up for a vote before the primary. People want to see action taken in the state Senate on this bill immediately. So, first off, a little bit of background. This bill is in the Senate Finance Committee, and a lot of my traveling has been to areas of the state where there are members of the Senate Finance Committee representing those particular areas. The Senate Finance Committee will be taking a vote on this bill in April, and we're told it's going to hit the Senate floor in May. Now, let's just say it does pass out of the Senate. It still has to go into the House. To get anything accomplished in the Pennsylvania House is nearly impossible. I've got to be honest with you, because there's 203 state reps. But that's part of the reason that we have individuals like myself, but more so individuals like yourselves, being able to contact your state representatives as well as your state senators, letting them know that this is an issue of concern to you. We have a website, and I'll mention it at the end, and actually at the very back table, there's plenty of handouts for each and every individual here to take one. But on that website, we are able to send messages to state senators. So if you were to visit this website right now on your computer, you could find out, first off, if you don't even know who your state senator is, you could find out who your state senator is. Then you can send them a message just indicating to them that you support 76. Now further on our website, we've got a whole host of facts. Everything I'm telling you right now, you can find it on our website. But what I like most about this website is the opportunity for you to share your story. I'm telling you right now, we've had thousands of people across Pennsylvania, that have told us exactly how property taxes have impacted them. I'm going to tell you right now, here in York County, we're hearing a lot of very unfortunate stories, and right now what we're trying to do is obviously educate lawmakers as well as educate different individuals about this bill so that we can, of course, push forward a vote. So I'm going to talk a little bit about funding overall. A lot of people get confused, and it's not because of their fault. Frankly, what ends up happening is you've got a whole host of different lobbying groups out there, as well as legislators that oppose this bill, that will continue to say false information. Sometimes people will get those emails and they'll say, a whole host of different political things that you just know they're not true. That's what I'm hearing day in and day out. My cell phone has been given out to thousands of people, and I'm getting text messages and getting phone calls, and I'm like, who is this person? But I'm getting a lot of people asking me, well, is this part true, or is that true? And it's unfortunate because when I ask them, well, where did you hear that from? They're like, well, I heard it from this teacher, I heard it from this school board member, I heard it from this legislator. I'm like, well, if the legislator is telling you this, they're really not informed, unfortunately, on this bill. So let's talk about funding for a second. I mentioned that in order to replace the dollars that go into the schools, in order to replace that school property tax funding, you would see an increase in the PIT and in the sales tax. A lot of times what ends up happening in Harrisburg are funds get collected, and God knows really what ends up happening to those funds. What ends up happening really is they just get put into an operating budget, a general fund, and then they get dispersed to wherever they're needed. What is that all about? I don't understand that. Now, what Senate Bill 76 does, it specifically creates the Education Stabilization Fund. That is a term that I have used more often than any other term when I'm talking about this bill. The Education Stabilization Fund is a line item in the general budget, Pennsylvania's general budget, where all the funds that get collected via the PIT and the sales tax go right into the Education Stabilization Fund to ensure that every single school district in the first year, and again, in the first year, get a dollar for dollar match what they would have received in property taxes. I'm going to repeat that because a lot of people, I say that like 3 or 4 times and they don't hear it. In the very first year, the funds that are getting put out via the Education Stabilization Fund will have a dollar for dollar match of what the school district would have received under property taxes. Nothing less, dollar for dollar. Every following year, the Education Stabilization Fund will give to every single school district in Pennsylvania an increase at the rate of inflation. I talked at the very beginning about House Bill 1776 and how the numbers didn't work. Although the idea obviously was very important at that time as it is right now, the numbers did not work. The numbers would have seen a shortfall. However, under Senate Bill 76, the way it's crafted now, the way the PIT numbers and the sales tax numbers are right now, this bill would be a solvent bill to ensure that school districts will receive, again, in that first year, dollar for dollar matches what they would have received in the property tax, and year after year increases at the rate of inflation. What a lot of people don't know is right now what's happening in school districts across Pennsylvania is school districts are increasing property taxes year after year at close to double the rate of inflation.
Right.
Double the rate of inflation. Now raise your hand in here right now if you're receiving salary at double the rate of inflation. Because if you are, maybe you can give me a phone call. We can talk afterwards. It's not happening. It really isn't happening. A very small minority of people that are fortunate enough to really recognize that. But most Pennsylvanians, they're not seeing that. So this is an opportunity to attach the rate of inflation to it. So school districts, in good years, are going to get more funding, and in bad years, they're still going to get funding at increases, but it might not be as high as those really good years. So let's talk a very brief second about those bad years. So 2009 is a good example of a year where people might not be spending on sales taxable items or what have you, or their PIT might not be all that high. Even during bad years, this plan has shown via our economic analysis, as well as the independent fiscal office, which I haven't talked about yet, both show that even during down economies, they will still be able to distribute funds for every single school district at the rate of inflation. So it's very important to recognize that this plan is a solvent plan. The number one thing I hear from people across Pennsylvania is they've heard that there's a shortfall to this bill. There is absolutely no shortfall to this bill. What that comes from is the forecast of if 76 did not pass, in the next 4 or 5 years, property taxes will increase at double the rate of inflation. So you would see $1.1 billion more in property tax growth here in Pennsylvania if 76 does not pass. However, as I mentioned, there is nothing in the IFO report or in our economic analysis that show a shortfall. As I mentioned, you will see increases at the rate of inflation. So a lot of times whenever I'm crossing the state, I actually tend to have a lot of school board members and a lot of teachers in the room asking me questions about this bill. And one of the questions that gets brought up is, what if our local school district wants to increase local taxes? Well, first and foremost, school districts under 76 will have an opportunity to increase local taxes, not property taxes, but local income taxes or local business taxes. However, it has to be done via a voter referendum. Now, they'll have to sell you as the homeowner or the property owner in that school district that this tax increase is a reputable tax increase. But the thing I always mention is, just 2 days ago, I was giving a speech, and I had a superintendent in the room saying, well, we need to have tax increases year after year, and this is what helps our schools. And I said to that individual, what's happening is, across Pennsylvania, you're telling us now that you need tax increases at more than the rate of inflation? That just doesn't seem logical to me. You should be able to work within a budget. You should be able to operate at the rate of inflation, because if you don't, the system is going to break. Frankly, the system is already broken. Now, let's talk a little bit about the stability. I did briefly mention, but I just want to make sure that everybody here has an understanding that Pennsylvania has a nonpartisan budgetary office that takes a look at proposed pieces of legislation as big and as comprehensive as Senate Bill 76. And this budgetary office is called the Independent Fiscal Office. This is a nonpartisan operation that takes a look at these bills. The Independent Fiscal Office, again, as well as our analysis. Our analysis was done by Anderson Economic Group, which is an economic firm out of Chicago that also studied this bill. Both of these economic reports corroborated the same exact things, and they both indicated that these two taxes will remain stable even in periods of down economies. The next thing I usually like to say is the fact that what's happening right now across Pennsylvania is property taxes are simply not that stable anymore. because they're going up at such an exponential rate that people now either have to put in a payment plan just to pay off their property taxes, or they simply just can't pay it at all, and they do not pay it. So what ends up happening is the school district says, well, next year, well, we couldn't collect these funds, so let's just increase it even more. But what ends up happening is that obviously it's going to hurt the homeowner or the property owner. A lot of times you have school boards or individuals that just have a question. They're saying, you know what, this bill is going to hurt local control. That's not true. So Senate Bill 76, the way it's created is there are no new mandates that are attached to the funding. So all that funding that comes back to every single school district via the Education Stabilization Fund, there's no new mandates attached to it. All the ones that are in existence, it's very difficult to do anything about that, but there are no new mandates. So those funds that are coming back to the school districts, those school districts have the opportunity to gear their budgets the way they feel that their constituents would like to see them. And frankly, you don't like it the way that they're doing their budgets. At the local level, you have the best ability to either elect them or elect somebody else into office. What I like about that is the fact that, again, it gives individuals, a lot of people get concerned about dollars going to Harrisburg. Even though, as I mentioned, this Education Stabilization Fund guarantees the funds going back to the school districts, what's even more exciting about this bill is the opportunity for individuals to ensure that there remains local control. I mentioned the $1 billion shortfall. I do have a chart, and unfortunately, I should have thought about this. I could have used the PowerPoint, but I'm just going to verbally tell it to you because I can verbally say it just as good as it shows. I have a chart that shows property tax growth since 1993, from 1993 to 2013. And if you take a look at the property tax growth, it's doubled over the rate of inflation since that time. So Pennsylvanians here, since 1993, are paying double the amount in property taxes based on that higher rate. So if you can already see that if that's the case since over that period of time, what's going to end up happening when 5-10 years from now they decide that they want to build another school or they want to do what have you with that funding? A lot of times people will say that increasing the sales tax is going to hurt seniors. The very first thing I say to that is the fact that property taxes are what's hurting seniors right now here in Pennsylvania. That's what's hurting seniors. It's hurting younger individuals as well. You're seeing younger individuals that have decided not to purchase a home here in Pennsylvania because what ends up happening is oftentimes their property tax payment is more than their mortgage payment month after month. So they're going to have to go ahead and look at another property. And frankly, they could still look at a property here in Pennsylvania, but they're not sure exactly what that property tax bill is going to be 5 years from now. So they're looking at surrounding states. That's why we're having such mass exodus of individuals that are graduating from college. Now the sales tax, again, keep in mind that those foods of necessity, those foods that you normally purchase, those healthy foods, that's going to remain not taxed. You can pretty much buy any article of clothing under $50, but really what it comes down to is the Pennsylvania Taxpayer Cyber Coalition did a synopsis, and what that synopsis showed was for every $1,000 in property taxes that are eliminated, to match it, you'd have to spend $14,000 in sales taxable items to match that. So unless you're purchasing like $14,000 in jeans or something like that, you're really going to be saving money. It's the property tax that's regressive here in Pennsylvania. So more or less to wrap up, I don't really know how much time I have. Perfect. And I do want to take a couple of questions, but I just want to wrap up really quick. We've done our homework with this bill, but as I mentioned, we've done the economic analysis, but we've also done survey work. We've done a series of survey questions across Pennsylvania. It's very easy for us to have that opportunity to hear from our own members what their clients are saying to them, but it's really better for us if we do a poll. So we conducted a poll here in Pennsylvania, a random sampling across Pennsylvania, and asked a series of questions. I'm going to mention two of them for you right now. First things first, Do you believe that it is the responsibility of the Pennsylvania legislature or the 500 school districts to fix the property tax problem that we have here in Pennsylvania? Overwhelmingly, individuals indicated that it is the job of the Pennsylvania legislature. Pennsylvania legislature, as Simon actually indicated earlier, it is in the Constitution that they would provide for education here in Pennsylvania. Now, secondly, what people don't know is in Pennsylvania, the original sales tax was created in 1953 at 1% to fund education. Secondly, what ended up happening was we ended up asking the survey respondents if you were to see an elimination of school property taxes, but you would see an increase in the PIT and in the sales, would you be in favor of this bill? 2-to-1 support said yes. Republicans, Democrats, Independents said yes. They wanted to see it because they felt safer under this plan. Now, property owners across Pennsylvania are telling this. I have probably met with more residents than some of the candidates for governor, and I'm not even joking with you right now, because people are calling and they're asking us to give presentations across this state wanting to learn more about Senate Bill 76. As I mentioned, on the back table, you're going to see a handout, very small thing, and palm card that shows the website. It's realreform76.com. I encourage you to go to that website. You can find out who your state senator is. You can share your story on that website. You can learn more about the facts of this bill. You can read about the myths that get often shared, and then you can find the real facts to fight off those myths. You can contact me on that website and what have you. But we talked about a grassroots movement with Simon's presentation. This in itself is a grassroots movement. If you guys do not contact your state senators, next year they're going to say, well, we'll figure something out. 10 years from now, they're going to say, let's figure something out then. This right now has 25 co-sponsors in the state senate. Let's make a vote happen now. We can get people to contact their state senators, give them a phone call, shoot them an email, put a letter to the editor out there, what have you. We've got templates for letters to the editor. We've got so much that we can help you with. I'm not spitting, I promise. That we can put you into a position of power. Really what it comes down to is you need to be educated on it, and you need to be willing to fight on your behalf. So I guess I have at least some time for a few questions, and then we'll go from there.
Maybe
So,
first, pick some of them.
you just pick.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out this evening. I have several comments to make. My first comment is regards to the fact that I think it's a shame that our senior citizens are paying the kind of real estate taxes they are. A lot of our senior citizens have lived in the same home for 40, 50 years. They've paid their home off. They've had it paid off for years. They've seen their school taxes rise dramatically. So now they end up, their monthly sales tax bill was probably more than their original mortgage was. And they're having to go out and get part-time jobs as a Walmart greeter or what other things. I think that's a travesty. The other thing is, we talk about school districts. We have 500 in the state. We have 13 school districts in York County. Why do we need 13 school districts in York County? Why do we need 500 in the state? So I think that's something that needs looked at too. I know in York County we got 13 superintendents, all making over 100 grand a year. I think they had an article in the paper here a year or so ago saying what the average salary was for superintendents. I think the top guy's making like 185,000 and the average was like 125,000. Not only have superintendents, they have principals and assistant principals. We have 13 transportation departments. We have 13 dietary departments and shared health plan. All those things would cut costs for our schools. The other thing is, I happen to be in the residential construction industry. Back in the mid-2000s, York County was the fastest growing county in Pennsylvania for new homes. And all I read about in the paper was, you know, all these anti-growth people saying, oh, there's too many people building here, they want to stop it. Well, you know what, we're an industrious people. And if we don't grow, we die. But while all the anti-growth people in the townships were complaining about this, they're reaping the benefits. I live in central school districts where they just built a Taj Mahal school and they spent like $70 million on it. Okay? Could they have built, and that directly reflects on what I pay in taxes, which I personally pay over $500 a month just to pay my real estate taxes. So the increased growth, we've had to build new schools since the beginning of time. But their school board looks at, they're competitive with the other school district, and they want my little Johnny to have the best of everything. So could they have built that school for $40 million or $50 million and saved the taxpayers and the residents and senior citizens money? Sure they could. If you fly over that school, it looks like a college campus with the artificial turf field and all the rest of it. So this is a major issue, and I think it needs to be addressed. And I hope when Scott Wagner gets to Harrisburg, he can shake things up there in this real estate tax problem.
I just want to touch briefly on that. I said I spoke a couple days ago, that superintendent, one of the things that really struck me with what he said was, we're not going to have good schools anymore. Yes, you will, and frankly, it doesn't matter how your school really looks, it's the education that you're offering the students. I wish I thought about that then, but of course I didn't. But it's something I would have said because the spending has become outrageous. And frankly, across Pennsylvania right now, I hear that very same thing in terms of consolidation. It's being discussed across Pennsylvania because people want to see it happen. Thank you.
Okay, an actual question more than a statement. Only one.
I can
I'm sorry.
I'd like to ask you this question. We have two bills. One's passed the House, this one that you're considering in the Senate. There's going to have to be reconciliation between the two, and they are very much opposed. How is this going to be reconciled to benefit people that are in this room and all the citizens of Pennsylvania?
Okay, so if you're talking about 76, the House bill and Senate Bill 76, they're identical bills. There's an amendment that's being discussed right now that will get attached to both House Bill and Senate. Are you talking about 1189?
1189.
All right, so 1189 is a separate property tax reform bill, and in short, it does not fix the property tax problem here in Pennsylvania. That is the short answer. It did pass in the House. It passed in the House with very little discussion. Really what it does is it puts the power back into the control of school districts. School districts can make the decision as to whether or not they will modify their tax structure to utilize other taxes to fund education here in Pennsylvania. And we all know that school districts are not going to do that. 1189, we did have the prime sponsor of 1189 come in and meet with us, and we felt that 1189 was not the answer. Now, Senate Bill 76 has an identical bill in the House, and once it passes in the Senate, then House Bill 76 will then get brought up for discussion in the House, because we believe, and the Senate also believes, the Senate, if you speak with a whole series of legislators in the Senate, even those individuals that are not co-sponsors of the bill, they will indicate that 1189 is not the right direction for Pennsylvania. 76 is.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, now we have Jodi Ferris from the Convention of States Project, which I know nothing about. Jodi, is this Mark Levin's thing with the constitutional amendments? Is this kind of a take off of that? Okay, so I'll hand it over to her.
I'm the only one in technology, so of course I'll be trying to slow everything down tonight. I was really encouraged to hear the two speakers before we talk about grassroots, because I am going to be talking about that as well. It sounds like tonight's theme is getting the people involved, and that definitely fits in with what I have to share with you. Do you mind? Or? Well, I was going to say, if it'll reach up here, I don't mind doing it. I am Jodi Ferris, like she said, and I am with the Convention of States Project. Has anyone here heard of the Convention of States Project? Sorry. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Has anyone here heard of the Convention of States Project?
Not sure.
All right, a few of you have. Great. Do you want to go to the click? All right, the first thing I'm going to start by talking about is what the Convention of States project, I'm going to kind of leave a little teaser out there as to what we are, because I will get to that. I'm going to start by talking about what the Convention of States project sees as the problem in our country today. Click again. The first issue I want to talk about is our federal finances. If anyone here is not familiar with our federal financial situation right now, we've broken it down the way it would look if it was a household budget. We take in $28,000 a year. We spend $35,000 a year, and we have $175,000 of outstanding credit card debt. Now, at the federal level, that's what we're talking about when we say $17.5 trillion of debt. That's that $175,000 figure, just in bigger numbers, obviously. Now, I've updated this slide every single time I've given a presentation because the numbers keep going up so fast, I just can't leave it alone. It changes almost daily. So these numbers, if you go home and check tonight, they'll be different because it's been a couple days since I updated it. But these numbers really concern us at the Convention of States project. We do not see how this debt is sustainable long term. These numbers also do not include unfunded mandates. So this does not reflect all of the debt we actually owe in our country. One of the examples that one of our founders likes to use is it's when you go and buy a car, and they say no payments until January. Well, you still owe the debt for that car, but because you're not making the payments on it, what our federal government does is they don't include that debt in our calculations. So we have a lot of debt out there that we're going to owe in the future that doesn't get included in this number. And depending on where you look, that number is anywhere from 100 to 200, or from 1 million to 2 million extra dollars in debt if you use the household version of the budget. So the debt is just very concerning to us. Federal regulations are the next issue. I think everyone in this room seems to be pretty aware of what goes on in our country and in politics. This is a bookshelf full of 80,000 pages of federal regulations that were added to the Federal Register last year in 2013. Now, if you notice, the stack up on the top, I guess it's your right, up on the very top, there's this little teeny stack up there. Does everybody see that? Yeah. That is the federal legislation that was actually passed by Congress. The rest of the papers on this bookshelf are regulations passed by unelected officials in federal agencies who are not accountable to the voters. So the federal regulations is another one of our concerns. And then the last one I'm going to talk about tonight is congressional attacks on state sovereignty. The papers moving around. Yes.
Perfect. On the Federal Register, that image was 1 year.
Yes.
Right, the Federal Register.
Yes, 1 year. Congress takes taxes, everybody. I mean, everybody here probably pays federal taxes, I would imagine. And what they do with that money is they then turn around and tell the states, well, we'll give you some of it back if you follow our rules. So, for example, I was at the Common Core hearing in Harrisburg a while back, and one of the questions that was brought up to the representative from the Department of Education was, is this a state-led initiative or is this federal? And the response from her was that it was a state-led initiative, but she kept talking about how Pennsylvania needed to get a federal letter for permission to do this or a federal letter for permission to do that. And the reality is there's funding tied to that. So even though Common Core is technically state-led, what the federal government is doing is saying, if you follow Common Core and you follow our rules all by your own initiative, all of your own free will, we'll give you extra money. We feel that that is essentially bribery, and it deprives the states of any true governing authority because they aren't really making their own laws. They're making laws that are best for federal dollars, not laws that are best for Pennsylvania, or whichever individual state you happen to be in. Okay, so what is our solution? We are proposing a constitutional solution using Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 of the Constitution, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, is the section of the Constitution that talks about how we amend our Constitution. And the relevant part that we are working with is that the Congress, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. And I'm going to talk about this more. We are proposing a convention be called for 3 purposes, 3 subject matters. And those are limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, and discussing term limits for federal officials. The call for the convention is 2/3 of the states have to file an application, which is, it's not an application in the sense that we use the word today, like if you're applying for something, it's more of a request or an acknowledgement that this is something you're asking for. And 34 is the number for that. 2/3 of the 50 states is 34 states. And Congress sets the time and the place for the convention. They have no other role. Washington, D.C. gets no other role in the call for the convention. At the convention itself, it's one state, one vote. It's not proportioned by population. The convention proposes amendments, and once those amendments are proposed, they're sent to Congress. Congress then sends the proposals out to the states for ratification, which is the second stage in the process. 3/4 of the states, which is 38, have to ratify any proposals before it would become part of the Constitution. Nothing actually would change whatsoever at the convention to the Constitution. The convention can only propose amendments, it cannot ratify them. With ratification, there are two modes of ratification provided for in the Constitution, and Congress's last role in this whole process is that they get to select the mode of ratification. The options they have are the state legislatures or state conventions. All but one of our current 27 amendments have been ratified by state legislatures. Congress does not get a vote in the ratification process, it is the states only. And as I said a minute ago, with 3/4 of the states ratify a proposed amendment, it becomes part of the Constitution. Okay, now there's a lot of questions that get asked about this process. Maybe some of you have heard them, maybe you haven't. Hopefully I'm not opening up too big of a can of worms here, but I try to address some of these questions up front just to answer them for people. So we'll go ahead to the first one. The first question we often get is, why don't we just enforce the Constitution that we have now? The example I like to use is the debt. What does the Constitution say about debt? We talked about our debt a minute ago. The Constitution says that Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, and that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. I don't think that's served us very well with $17.5 trillion of debt at this point. The next question is, but the federal government doesn't follow the Constitution we have now. The Supreme Court said that the framers would not have conceived that any government would conduct such activities, referring to the activities our current elected officials in D.C. are conducting. Yet the powers conferred upon the federal government by the Constitution were phrased in language broad enough to allow for the expansion of the federal government's role. And it's that phrased in language broad enough that concerns us. The issue we have is the Constitution as it's interpreted by the Supreme Court and the Constitution as it was originally intended by the founders. We want to add amendments that will clarify that broad language and shore it up and tighten it so that there's not as much leniency and that the Supreme Court can't use, creative interpretation or, well, this word means something different than what it really meant, to expand the federal government's role. And then there's also the issue of inadequate checks and balances. For example, people talk about term limits. Term limits on Congress, it's a little controversial among some groups, but what's never been controversial from all the people I've spoken to is term limits on the Supreme Court. We don't vote for them, we can't vote them out, we can't do anything about it, we have to wait till they quit or die. There's no other way to get rid of them, so at this point in time at least. And then as far as whether or not Congress follows amendments, again, back to that broad language. More recent amendments that don't have broad language but that are specific are followed. Nobody's trying to reinstate slavery. Nobody's trying to stop me from voting as a woman. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. I think they're following that pretty good. The direct election of senators. Now, whether or not you agree with that, Congress is definitely following it. There's no one trying to have the legislatures appoint senators directly at this point in time. And presidential term limits, since that amendment was ratified, that has been followed as well. And what is the risk of a runaway convention? This is one of the big ones that we do. The convention is limited by the subject matter in the application. Those were the three topics I talked about earlier, the limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, fiscal restraints, and term limits. There have been over 400 applications for an Article 5 convention filed in our nation's history. The reason we've never had a convention is because we've never had 2/3 of the applications for the same subject matter. So the applications are limited by the subject matter. The convention is limited by the subject matter in the applications. At the convention itself, if somebody did decide to go to the convention as a delegate and got some wild idea about some crazy amendment that everybody over the age of 50 had to dye their hair purple, they would have to convince 25 other states to go along with that amendment and pass it out of the convention. The state legislatures also have control of the delegates. So if a delegate was to go and propose the purple hair amendment, the legislature could say, wait a minute, that's outside of the scope of your authority. We're recalling you, we're pulling you from the convention, we're bringing you back, and in some cases, they can face criminal penalties. In Indiana, it would be a Class D felony if a delegate was to go outside of their instructions at the convention. I think it would be highly unlikely for a delegate to risk those kinds of charges and consequences to propose an amendment outside of the scope of the convention's call that's not likely to gain support anyway. After that, even if it was to get through all of those steps in the process, you would then have to convince 38 states to ratify the amendment, which is just very unlikely. You have to get both the Senate and the House in those 38 states to ratify the amendment. To stop the amendment, you only have to get the Senate or the House in 13 states to disapprove it, to stop it. So it's a much harder battle and task to get an amendment through and get it approved than it is to stop one. So there really has to be widespread support among all Americans to get an amendment through. And finally, there's no history of a runaway convention. And I don't know how much time I still have, but for the sake of time, I'll sort of skip going into that in detail, but if we have time at the end and anyone has a question, I thought we can go into that more. What would the Founding Fathers say about this? George Mason, this quote is from June of 1787. He was at the at the convention in Philadelphia where they were talking about the Constitution, trying to hash out the details for the Constitution we currently have. And he was concerned because Article 5 gave Congress the exclusive authority to be able to propose amendments. He thought that was not a good solution because it didn't balance the power if Congress was to get out of control. He said, amendments therefore will be necessary, and it will be better to provide for them in an easy, regular, and constitutional way than to trust to chance and violence. It would be improper to require the consent of the national legislature because they may abuse their power and refuse their consent on that very account. If you're in D.C., would you expect the people in D.C. right now to impose term limits on themselves or to cut off their spending? No. That's why George Mason, 2 days before the Philadelphia Convention concluded, George Mason proposed the Convention of States method, and that was inserted into Article 5 of the Constitution for that exact purpose. And then one other quote from James Madison in a letter to Edward Everett. He said, should the provisions of the Constitution, as here reviewed, be found not to secure the government and rights of the states against usurpations and abuses on the part of the United States, the final resort within the purview of the Constitution lies in an amendment of the Constitution according to a process applicable by the states. So the Founding Fathers recognized that if the federal government gets out of control, the states are going to need to rein them in. So what is our plan? The grassroots, just like has been the theme all night. The general overview of the plan is that we want to get a grassroots movement in 40 districts in 40 states. Our goal is to have 100 or more volunteers in each of those districts. And in Pennsylvania, we have an average of 60,000 people in each House legislative district. Are there 100 people, are there 100 patriots in each of those districts out of those 60,000 people that we can find to stand up for our country? I think so. I think that's a very achievable goal. Right now, there is, where we're at in Pennsylvania, this is a new slide for me, so I'm going to probably stumble through it a little bit. There is interest in our Senate for the Article 5 application that we're proposing. The last email that we got is that at this point in time, the discussion among the senators has shifted from if we want to do this to which senator is going to take the lead on it. The senator who has expressed the most interest and is kind of spearheading the effort at this point is retiring. And so my understanding is that he's not comfortable taking the lead on this. We are going back and meeting with the senators again on Monday, so hopefully we'll have more information after Monday. And there's interest in the House as well. We've had discussions with a number of different supporters, and we have people that are considering sponsoring the application in the House as well. Like the gentleman before me said, though, the House is much bigger than the Senate, so that is a much harder job. So we want to make sure that we're just really doing our due diligence and building our grassroots before we try and just jump in with both feet, to make sure that our legislators really hear from us as people in Pennsylvania and know that we want this done. How you can help. The first thing to do is sign up on our website. That sounds kind of cliche, but everything goes through our website. Updates about what's happening in Pennsylvania, updates about who to call, updates about where to go, updates about meetings we're having, things you can do to volunteer. Everything that you could possibly want to know about the Convention of States project is sent out through our website. From home, the things you can do is write, call, fax your legislators, send letters to the editor. Our website, just like the gentleman before me said about his, it's incredible. We have every resource imaginable on the website. You can call your legislators directly from the website. It'll take you directly to who your legislator is, so you don't need to look them up if you don't know them. You can call them right from there. You can email them, send them a letter, send them a fax. Everything can be done right from our website. In the community, you can organize, speak, and assist at events. Just like what I'm doing tonight. And with the legislature, you can build relationships, visit the legislators, and attend hearings. Once we get an Article 5 application introduced, there's going to be hearings, and we want to turn people out for those. We want to have actual bodies at the Capitol in Harrisburg, showing them physically by our presence that we really support this and that we really want to see change in our country. And so that's the end of the presentation. So if there's questions, I am happy to take questions.
Okay, actual question.
I was just wondering, one of the issues that I have with the federal Congress is some of the abuses of power, such as Congress's ability to engage in insider trading, using insider information, things like that, and using PAC money for personal gain, so on and so forth. Do those abuses fall under any of those three topics, those goals that you're pushing?
I'm not sure. Generally speaking, it would be things that Congress is officially legally doing, not things that they would be illegally doing. Obviously, it's very hard to regulate illegal behavior because it's already illegal. But anything that would, if there was something that could be done to rein in, Congress's ability to have access to that type of information, that could possibly be at the convention. But I would be happy to check with people that are higher up than me in the organization that would definitely know the answer to that question if you have to.
You may have mentioned this, and I may have missed it, but are there any states that are already on board with this?
Oh, I didn't mention that actually. At this point, 11 states have begun the process. Of those 11 states, I believe 4 of them have it passed in either one house or the other, and it's working its way through the other half of the system. And Georgia has passed it in both houses. Georgia is finished. Their application is done.
Another question? We good?
I don't know if you are familiar with a World Bank whistleblower, Karen Hudas.
No.
Okay, she's speaking a lot about this. You can find her on the internet. Her name is Hudas. Karen. Well, I don't necessarily agree with everything she says. She has a lot to say about the convention, and she claims that the request for a convention has already happened. It just needs to be actioned on. And there's a group of, I think it's called the Group of Governors, that there's 10 governors within the states, of all the states in the United States, that she's working through to get this constitutional convention. So I don't know if you want to, she's in Maryland, so she's very accessible. And you might find it interesting to contact her regarding this. And it's Karen Udis. Again, she's a full bank whistleblower. She's talked about a lot of this stuff. But she's also pushing very heavily for this constitutional convention.
Okay. If you want to get with me afterwards and give me that information, I'd be happy to follow up on it. I know that the research from the legal people that have been advising the Convention of States project is that the applications do have to be for the same subject matter, and we aren't at that point, with our application or with any of the others. So, I'd certainly be happy to look into that more and get back to you with more information.
You mentioned before districts with an average of 60,000 in them. What kind of districts are you talking about?
State house districts.
And there's an average of 60,000 in Pennsylvania, is that what it is?
In each state house district, yes.
Anybody else? I have one question. I've heard that the institution of the U.S. Constitution was actually a runaway convention of the, what was it called now that it's called the Articles of Confederation. Is there an answer for that one?
There is. That's a question we get a lot, actually. There was a couple things going on back then. The main two concerns are that they changed the rules for ratification and that they went outside the scope of their instructions. Actually, can you click to the next slide? I have a hidden slide on here just because of that question. As far as whether or not the original convention went outside the scope of their instructions, what's commonly said is that they were supposed to simply amend the Articles of Confederation, and instead they completely changed and replaced them. What their actual instructions were was to render the Constitution of the federal government adequate for the exigencies of the Union, which is pretty broad. It's not limited in virtually any way. So it would be really hard to go outside those limitations. As to the issue of whether or not they changed the process, that's an interesting issue, and it has to do with the chronology of events. Under the Articles of Confederation, any changes had to be unanimously approved, and it got changed to our current 3/4. And the concern is that the convention today could go in and change it to whatever they wanted, so that it was no longer 3/4, and that they would then be able to pass and ratify anything they wanted. But what happened under the Articles of Confederation when they were at the Philadelphia Convention is that somebody proposed the change that it not be unanimous anymore, but that it be 3/4, because they weren't able to get anything done with it being unanimous. That proposal went through the process, and the change from unanimous to 3/4 was unanimously approved under the old process. They then went back and made the other changes under the 3/4 approval, which was the new process. So what that would look like in today's world was if somebody wanted to change the process, you'd have to file 34 Article 5 applications with the subject matter of wanting to change the process for ratification. Then you would have to have the convention. You'd have to get a proposal to change the process. That proposal would have to be ratified by 38 states. Then you'd have to start all over with your Article 5 applications for a new subject matter to go back in and have the new proposals under the new process. At this point, nobody that I know of is even proposing to change the process. So those are the two most common myths about that. Like I said, we are grassroots. We are definitely looking for volunteers at this point. We have about 500 volunteers in Pennsylvania at this point in time. Just for context, has anyone here heard of the balanced budget amendment movement for an application for a balanced budget amendment? That's been going on about 20 or 30 years. And they have somewhere around 30 applications, depending on how you count them. We've been in operation since about August of last year, and we already have 11 states that have started the process. What we are finding is that people are ready for this. People want to see change in our country. People want to be able to do something. They want to be able to do something big, and they want to be able to do something that's going to make a real difference and a real impact on our country. And this is it. This is we've got a big problem and we've got a big solution. So we are definitely looking for volunteers. We're looking for people to make phone calls, write letters. We're also looking for what we call district captains, which are people in your own house district that organize events like this. Speak at them, reach out to people in your community, educate your neighbors and friends, and work with your legislator in your districts to get their support. So we're definitely looking for people to volunteer at all levels. If you have some unusual skill and you think, oh, this could never possibly help, let me know. For example, right now we're looking for seamstress for an event we have this summer. So any random weird talent that you think you could contribute and offer to your country, if you don't know how, just let me know, because we'll find a way to get you involved and get you on board.
They don't start taking the chairs out from under us for another 15 minutes, and we were wondering if our newest rock star, Scott Wagner, might want to say a few words. Our Governor Tobin Corbett's thorn. Where are you at, Bob? So Bob is already, he's running, or to the petition thing, I don't know what the status.
April 2nd, I'll know whether I'm alive or dead.
Okay, all right, but he is here if you'd like to speak with him afterwards.
Keep breathing.
Good evening. I'm going to be very, very brief. It appears that I will be sworn in next Wednesday. I think, again, it was so critical to point out to everyone that we had almost 11,000 write-in votes. And I mean, the timing is everything. And I tell you, there's a lot going on right now, and I think people are really paying attention, and I think we are going to see changes. Is that better? Going to Harrisburg is a whole new experience for me. And I've chosen a chief of staff, and I have always believed you hire super smart people and surround yourself with smart people. Have the opportunity to hire someone that has some experience. He was in Harrisburg for 5 years, left, has been back to Altoona for 4 years, and is going to move to Harrisburg with his wife. And I had the opportunity to meet this person last week, and I spent the whole day on Monday with him. He came to Penn Race, and he met with my political people and some of my managers, and gave him a tour, just gave him a flavor of what I'm all about and how I operate in the private sector. So we expect next Wednesday we'll be up and running, and it's definitely going to be an experience. And I'm still to a certain degree pinching myself, wondering how fast this. I mean, it's like a roller coaster ride. But again, I appreciate the support of everyone in the room. And if you've sent me an email or a text, and if I haven't gotten back to you, I'm working through it. The next morning I had over 500 emails, and I was getting texts. My phone, I guess, dumps 40 texts at a time. So, I'm trying to get around to everyone, but there's a lot to do in Harrisburg. And it was interesting to hear from Simon and the other presenter on the school taxes to see exactly, what options out there. But what the options are. But I'm looking forward to sitting down with some knowledgeable people in Harrisburg and learning more about the issue, and then running numbers. And one of the things I wanted to ask earlier was, through this whole analysis of these tax bills, has anybody, really taken our model and compared it to Maryland? Because I'm curious how Maryland's got county systems, and I own a piece of property on the Eastern Shore, and there's quite a bit of taxes involved. But I also am not a Maryland. I don't pay income tax in Maryland. So I'm very interested. And one thing I do all the time, I compare pricing in our business, to different areas, and we're constantly comparing things. So it'd be interesting to see how this, what the numbers look like. But again, I appreciate all your support. It's going to be quite an experience, and I'll be back next month and give you an update. And we're going to continue to send emails out and keep everyone informed. But again, I'm very, very humbled by this experience, by the outpouring of votes and the people that I've heard from. And I will tell you that an experience, just a real quick experience. I was told by a former employee at my old company, York Waste Disposal, that you got to get down to Dallastown. You got to meet a guy named Gene Snyder. He's the barber. So I went down early, this late October, early November, and I met Gene. Gene's 80 years old. He cuts hair. And he's got a barber shop in the front of his house. And if you ever want experience, go down there to Gene's barber shop, because he's got a couple deer heads hanging there. He's got all kinds of stuff, but he's got Barack Obama toilet paper. It's an experience. But Gene was a big man. I went down there, and Gene and I became very good friends. I'm actually getting my hair cut now with Gene, but there's a young lady who's 27. She's a friend of the family of Gene, and she's 27. She has a teaching degree. She has $140,000 in student debt. She can't find a job. And this young lady pumps out like 25 haircuts a day. And I went down there, when I first met her, I'm like, so after a couple of weeks, I got my haircut there, and I saw on the wall it was $8 for a haircut, and I got them to raise their price to 10. That's a great price to 10. Everywhere else it's 15. But so Gene's been a great resource. But Saturday morning, my fiance and I are going to Gene's barbershop at 6 a.m. in my Silverado pickup truck. And Gene and I and Tracy are going to start in Crayley. This is the first day of trout season. We're working the whole way up from Crayley up to Isaac Walton to meet all Gene's buddies who are out fishing. So there's going to be a lot of chewing the fat. We're not fishing, so we're going to be probably drinking coffee and shaking hands. But that's the kind of stuff we're doing. And you know what? It really is fun. And when you get out there and you go to senior centers, you go to NRA, events. I went to a gun club. The site's a gun club in New Freedom. And I spent time at the meeting, and there was a report one evening by a gentleman who is an instructor for, I guess, high school aged students. And this guy's son was in England last year and won 4 gold medals in a shooting competition. Very, very cool. His son's won getting a free ride to college because of his shooting skills. They have 2 students, seniors, that are going to go to West Point. And when you get out, and I have not. I've been in a lot. Again, I get out and see a lot of customers and a lot of municipal meetings. But it's really been a great experience. When you get around this stuff, this is America, and it's there's just a lot of super genuine people. So if you're going to be out trout fishing Saturday, and like you're down between Isaac Walton and Crayley, look for it. So, but anyway, I thank you for your support, and next week the games begin.
Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done a lot of work. We've tried to help a lot of candidates out. We tried to make headway. Every time we get hit up against the wall. Get little elections, you get like your tax collectors, your committee people. This was a very exciting campaign for me as well, Scott. To be able to see something like this, to see the people come out with the energy, the support, not like they were just completely pissed off. They were ready. They were like, I'm out here, and it was Democrats and Republicans, independents. People in my community who I don't agree with politically. They were happy to get out and support Scott because of the campaigning on the other side. It was awesome. So it gave me more energy to go to the next election and the next election. So there's plenty more to do. So I don't want to make this long, but I have a couple questions. One of them is, why are we here? Why are you here? Are you here to listen to the speakers, candidates, politicians? There's many reasons to come here. We put on a pretty good meeting. Ask yourself, what have I done really to get involved? And this last election, quite a few people really got out there and they knocked on doors, they got signatures on petitions, they talked to people, they put up signs, they sat at the polls, and they greeted the voters. You might ask yourself, how can I make a difference? If you watch this election, that's who did make a difference. It was me and you. We did it. I mean, Scott had the support. He had to do his advertising, but still, unless you get down to the people, you go door to door, or you talk to them at the polls, you don't get them. And if you don't get there, I still don't think all the money in the world is going to get that election. So, we made that difference. Let's ask here, what was Scott up against? Or anybody else who wants to run against the establishment. First of all, we had outside influence. You got money from Philadelphia. Now, I don't know what the numbers were, but everybody was saying maybe 100,000 coming in from Philadelphia. We had Harrisburg. You got the governor's office pushing a special election that we did not need. It cost a lot of people time. I had to take a day off to sit at the polls. My wife did. You have inspectors, you have judges, all that stuff. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort. Yeah, there were York Republican Committee. They joined with Harrisburg, and also they had the nomination vote the same night that we had a planned committee, or our planned meeting. Was it coincidental? I don't know. The Senate Republican Campaign Committee, they put out a bunch of flyers, some of them kind of nasty. If you went to your mailbox, I mean, this is just one of each of them. Sometimes we got 3 of them because we have 3 voters in the household. So, times 3. One of the things that keeps bugging me when I see some of these the flyers, one of them says, well, Scott's trying to buy an election. Well, anytime you donate money to a campaign, you're helping them to buy advertisements, letterheads, support, whatever. You're still helping them to buy that election. So whatever term you want to use on it, you're buying election, you're supporting election. It's the same thing. Then we have the newspapers. Progressive slant. And you know who's behind the scenes. Well, I was on a Facebook conversation with a guy. I think I tweeted or put a Facebook thing out about the election. I said, thanks to all the support for everybody. And I'd see all the nice comments, and all of a sudden I got one that says, God help us all. Okay, so I said, I guess you're not a Scott Wagner supporter. He came back, I'm not a Republican supporter, blah, blah, blah. He just went off. I'm like, okay, well, I kind of responded with a little bit. I was respectful. He wasn't. At the very end, it was like, go find yourself, was the last comment. I mean, it was a little different here, but. So I went further and I kind of investigated. I was like, okay, let me go to his Facebook page. And I saw a couple names on his Facebook page, and one of them was Kaufman. I'm like, it's Christine Kaufman. Hey, that's the newspaper. So I went to her site. The very first picture I see, Todd Collins. I see a like for Obama for America. And I see a like for Linda Small, Ron Miller, Tom Wolf. Now there's both Democrats, both Republicans, all over her likes. But when you look at the articles that she wrote, there was definitely a slant that was more so against us. Also with Christina Kaufman, every time I see an article with her, it was either praising an entrepreneur like Tom Wolf, who received $1 million from Bonton Executive, or we see Scott Wagner getting bashed for supporting a candidate. So that's the newspaper slant. Then you have the flyers, like I discussed here. I had the numbers, I tried to figure out who was doing what, and it proportionally, one side was the same as the other. You had backing from outside groups that did most of the nasty stuff, and the candidates themselves were usually pro themselves, and that was it. What was huge here was the write-in candidacy. Like Scott said, it was almost 11,000 votes. It just doesn't happen. You have to really get people upset and ready for a change to do something like that. That was amazing. And this was mentioned on Hannity's radio show, and I don't know if anybody knows Katie Abram, but she jumped on our Facebook post, and she congratulated us. She said, I'm in Florida, and they are all talking about this race. So this is not just York County, this went everywhere. Finally, I'll mention Bob Wilson. He claims our group, we're not pure tea. He always says he puts out these olive branches to us, but I'll just read one of his quotes. What they are is a group of individuals who help to sell books and online subscriptions. According to them, they are not a political group. They are an educational group teaching people to dig holes in the ground for the impending government collapse of zombie apocalypse, whichever comes first, is not contributing anything positive to the political spectrum. Then he goes on to say, but at a local level, the Tea Party could have little effect other than pushing moderates further to the right for primaries. Well, this wasn't too long ago, and I think I need to probably show him this. This would be great. So finally, after all that, you ask yourself, what can I do? Well, there are several candidates that are running in the primary. They need your help. They need people to walk around, put papers out, door to door, stand at the polls. Standing at the polls is very important. They like to see somebody there. They're not necessarily going to take your information, but when they see you there with your candidate sticker and you're saying, do you have any questions, do you need any help? They like that, they appreciate that. They're not going to take your flyer and walk in, oh, well, I'll vote for them. But if they already supported you going in there, they're definitely going to support you as they walk up to the poll. So that support is greatly needed. Does your group here need anything? These three speakers here tonight, they were talking about things that are needed. Can you get involved? Do you have the time? You know, anything small, large, whatever. So, just one of the quotes from one of our founders, and you know, we do this all the time, but I really like this one. When asked, what form of government have you given us, and Benjamin Franklin replied, exactly. And if we don't keep it, they're going to take it. So you have to get involved, especially in our group here. The Scott Burkholder and his wife Leanne, they had to step back because they were doing this for 40 years. The group actually, I'm humbled that they gave me the ability to be the president here. I hope I can do as well as Scott did, but after 4 years, hopefully I've done what he's done. So we have positions here. We want to try to get donations. Each one of these meetings costs anywhere from $800 to $1,000. We can only do so many. The more we get in, the more of these meetings we can do. More information for you. Merchandising and marketing. You know, if you're into finding stuff that people might want to buy, like something you thought, a coffee mug or something that would be cool with our name on it or something. If you have ideas, let us know so we can start doing some marketing. Social media, we need people out there responding to people on Facebook. Like this guy that said, God help us all. Well, I responded to him. I did it respectfully, but I let him know that, you know, I didn't agree with him. We need help on our website with maintenance. I generally did it. I don't have time to. I'd really love to have somebody help us on that. Secretarial work, very important position. When we're having leadership meetings or steering committee meetings, we need somebody to keep us on track and keep us focused. So that's another position we'd love to have filled. And other leadership roles. And finally, if there's anything you're thinking of running for, writing candidacies work. There's positions available in each one of the communities. I think the Republican, the county committee seats. If you know that there's one open, run a write-in candidacy. Stand there, hand them a card as they go to the polls, say, please write me in. It really works, doesn't it? Okay, that's all I have.
And point out, there are several candidates here that could use your help. Please talk to them after the meeting. I thought I saw Kelly is over there. Kelly needs quotes, proverbs, and adages so we can stop stealing them from me. So that's kind of help Kelly needs. I thought I saw Ernie here. Did Ernie leave?
Ernie?
Ernie Mercer. Bob Pizzardi is here in the back.
Yep, Bob. And also
And of course me.
Beth Robert. Okay, is that it?
I think so. Any more? And Ed is running for the state committee.
Yes, I'm running for state committee as well. Yes, sir.
My name is Mike Donahue. I talked to Carol Tingle a little bit today about this. I listen to that WSBA station a lot, and you mentioned ways we can help. Pick up the phone, call in there and say, you know, I'm for House Bill 76. You know, why doesn't Seth Grove come on the air and tell us about House Bill 1189? He writes letters to the paper. But I'd love to see him answer a question from Gary Sutton, like, you know, what about this? What about this?
Well, we would have loved to have had him come in here when we had a meeting with David Baldinger with, was it HB 1776 at the time? one of the bills, but we tried to get him in here to compare and contrast his bill with David Baldwin.
Well, my point is, it couldn't be any easier. You pick up the phone and say, I want to talk about this. The chances are you'll be on the air in 4 minutes. The other thing I want to mention is letters to the editor. They take a little bit more time, and you better probably choose your words a little bit more carefully. But we could all write letters supporting the various candidates. You can only write one letter a month, I think it is.
There's plenty of people writing letters. Why not if you do and get your point on?
But the radio station is just too simple. And to me, it's a friendly audience for our message. Say Seth Grove, Ron Miller. I don't think I've heard Ron Miller on that station once until last week when he was on debate with Scott Wagner. That's the first time I've ever heard him on there. So why he doesn't want to defend himself, so we should push our message there.
Exactly. If they're not going to come out there and defend anything, then let's go after it. Respectfully, of course.
But you can only call in. There's so much. So if everybody calls in, it's not the same old person calling in every time.
And it's not easy. I mean, if you go to write a letter, you've got to submit it. I mean, ask somebody else. Read my letter. In fact, I have one here that I've been working on over the past few days. Get a passion about one of the topics and just start writing. It's not going to look good the first time, guaranteed, because I wrote it and I gave it to my wife in the morning. She's like, it's horrible. I'm like, what?
And he blamed it on that she's not a morning person.
Well, she's not a morning person. She did bash me on it. And I thought about it for a day. I was like, you know what? I think she's right. There's something I didn't like about it. I thought about it. I asked a couple other people. I rewrote it, and I gave her to the next day. She's like, this is awesome. I'm like, okay, I didn't think exactly, but all right, that's cool. I'll take it. So, write them.
One thing along this letter writing thing, I have a friend who writes some real good letters to the editor. Sometimes he puts them in his name. Sometimes he puts them in his wife's name. Sometimes he puts them in his wife's maiden name. But I happen to know her maiden name, so I know who wrote the letter.
This is a little bit off of the state-related issues, but it goes back to some of the comments this gentleman on the aisle was saying over here about the Central School District about self-help. I'll be the first one to admit I do not go to many school board meetings. Quite frankly, they're a painful thing to sit through. One of my best friends is a member, thank God for that. But you would be astounded at the lack of public participation in a school board meeting. And now, every school board in the state is in the process of developing their budget, and they will be voting on it in May or June. So if you want to have an impact, go to the school board, make your comments known, or send an email to the president of the school board and the superintendent of the school district. These people are flying blind, and we're putting all our trust in what they're deciding. So we can help ourselves in that respect now.
Well, if you want to get ready for the next primary, 2015, is when the next school board elections are. At the end of the year, what I'd like to do is start organizing some people and just start talking about running the school board candidates. We have 16 school districts, is that right? Okay. There's 4 candidates most likely, most of them, some 5. It's every 2 years you elect half of them. Get out there. If you want to change this, you take over the school board. I mean, yeah, you can have 76, you can have these other things, just stop views and all that. But if you clear out what's in there, if you get normal everyday people, not teachers, not husbands and wives of teachers, you get us on there, you change it. And you can't just change 1 against 4. You got to get a bunch of people out. Get your friends, walk to your neighborhood, and campaign for yourself. And if you need help, ask. I got to stop, sorry.